The idea that everyone has their own truth or logic is subjective. This is merely intellectual paralysis disguised as tolerance, and therefore it should have no place in serious discourse. Relativism claims that everyone has their own truth, their own logic, and their own reality. This sounds wonderfully democratic and inclusive until you realize what this actually means in practice. That is to say, there is no absolute truth. However, relativists cannot distinguish between facts and interpretations. They believe that subjective opinions exist on the same epistemic level. When someone says they have their own logic, what they really mean is that they have their own system of associations and emotional responses. But logic isn't a matter of personal taste, like choosing ice cream flavours. Logic is a tool for checking statements against contradictions, and it operates according to specific rules. You can either follow these rules correctly or violate them incorrectly. And when you violate them, you're simply wrong, not creatively different. When a relativist declares truth doesn't exist, we can immediately ask whether this statement itself is true or false. If it's true, then truth exists, and we have then a contradiction. If it's false, then the relativist should stop talking because they've just admitted they're wrong about their central claim. Similarly, when someone announces that everything is subjective, we can ask whether this includes their own statement about subjectivity. If it does, then the statement has no universal significance and can be dismissed based on anyone's subjective preference to ignore it. Relativists love to declare that everyone has their own reality, but this fundamentally misunderstands the relationship between perception and facts. Each person has their own model of reality, their own interpretive framework, and their own cognitive limitations. But models can be tested against factual evidence and compared for accuracy and predictive power. When an airplane crashes, this isn't an interpretation or a matter of perspective. It's an unlikely but measurable event that occurred in physical space and time. Your emotional reaction to the crash, your cultural framework for understanding aviation disasters, and your personal associations with flying are all subjective elements. The actual impact of metal against ground follows physical laws regardless of anyone's opinions about aviation safety. Now we reach the most crucial point about relativism's role in contemporary culture. It operates as a meta-strategy for protecting ideas from logical analysis. Any claim, no matter how obviously false or internally contradictory, can be defended by invoking the magic phrase, "That's just your interpretation." If one person claims the temperature outside is 70 degrees, while another insists it's 30 degrees, the actual temperature isn't 50 degrees, just because we found a numerical midpoint between two conflicting claims. It's discovered through the analysis of valid reasoning patterns. Logical principles operate independently of cultural contexts, just like mathematical or physical laws. When a thermometer reads 98.6 degrees, that's a measurement based on physical properties. When you decide that 98.6 indicates health or illness, that's an interpretation based on medical knowledge and contextual factors. The alternative to relativism isn't dogmatism or authoritarian thinking. It's logical verification and evidence-based reasoning. Instead of declaring that everything is equally valid, we can develop criteria for distinguishing between claims that can be tested and claims that cannot be tested. We can separate arguments that follow logical principles from arguments that violate those principles. Logic doesn't represent an assault on creativity. It provides navigation tools for moving through complex information landscapes and distinguishing between statements that correspond to measurable reality and statements that reflect personal preferences or cultural assumptions. When someone makes a factual claim, logic helps us determine whether that claim can be verified, what evidence would support or refute it, and how it relates to other established knowledge. Truth is the correspondence between statements and measurable conditions. Truth is structural, not democratic. It doesn't care about votes or feelings. If you claim there is an apple on the table, and there is actually an orange on the table, you're not expressing a different cultural perspective or alternative way of knowing. You're simply incorrect about what's sitting on the table. And this error can be corrected through direct observation. Relativism presents itself as a tolerance for diverse perspectives, but it actually represents the abandonment of any meaningful distinction between truth and falsehood, between accurate and inaccurate claims, between logical and illogical reasoning. This isn't a philosophical sophistication, it's intellectual surrender disguised as wisdom. It makes serious discourse impossible by eliminating the shared standards that allow people to evaluate competing claims. The next time someone tells you that everyone has their own truth, you can ask them whether this includes the claim that everyone has their own truth. The real truth is simple. Either you have evidence and logical arguments supporting your position, or you don't. Everything else represents various sophisticated methods for avoiding the hard work of actual thinking.